Hey, Tribe. All right, so my experience with black spirituality and black nationalism. When I went off to college after high school, that's when I really started learning about black studies and African history and the history of South America and the Caribbean. And that's when I really started realizing that so many of the things that African Americans are taught is really traumatic regarding our spirituality. We're taught that the God is a white male. So there's so many African Americans who worship this white Jesus. And okay, that's what was given to us because this is what happened as a result of our enslavement here. So fine, for your God to reflect your image. It even says that in the Bible. The God has to reflect your image, because if the God does not reflect your image, then that's a psychological trauma. If the God is white and you're black, you're automatically going to think psychologically that you're the opposite of God, which could mean you're the devil. So it's psychological enslavement. It's spiritual trauma that we have endured just from our experience here. Black people, the experience here and in the Caribbean and in South America. So important for you to have your God to reflect you. Why? Because then you start feeling and knowing, which is more important, knowing in your heart that God really does reside inside of you, right in your heart, right in your bones, right in your blood. If the gods that you are praising do not reflect you, it's going to be difficult for your mind to conceive that that's you. If you have, me for example, I started learning about the Ifa goddesses, the Yoruba goddesses. I started studying the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, and that helped me to ground myself into who I am now in this lifetime. You have to start there. You have to start with who you are in this lifetime. So I went through black nationalism because after I learned of so much of the history and so many things that we were not taught about who we really are and who our ancestors really are in history, then I started feeling like nationalism was probably the best way to go because of our trauma. So I went through that for some years, and what I learned was, unfortunately, a lot of the leaders in the black consciousness community are driven by ego, and in a way that was good, because when you're oppressed so much, you need to have a very strong force to get you out of that. But it's a temporary force. It's a temporary measure to the situation that we're in. We're here because we're here to evolve. Black spirituality and black nationalism helped me to learn to love myself for exactly who I am, exactly how my hair grows out of my head, exactly the color of my skin tone, to respect my ancestors, to realize that they're always here for me, that they're always listening. It's extremely important for me to have goddesses and gods that reflect me, because then this allows me to start loving myself. It allowed me to start respecting myself. It allowed me to start honoring myself and the divine that's inside of me. After that, I started realizing that what we are really on the outside is just skin suits. It's skin suits. So you can have brothers and sisters from different races and different cultures. But if you're not grounded and rooted in your own, then what happens is, if you venture off and learn about a different race or a different culture, if you're not grounded in your own, you're just going to get lost. You're going to get lost because you have no grounding, you have no footing, you have no confidence in who you are. You have to be confident in who you are in order to be able to learn and to contribute to another race or another culture. You have to be able to share what you are, but you can't share what you are if you don't know what you are, if you don't respect what you are. So although I'm not in a black nationalist organization any longer, because I feel like I've kind of grew out of it, but in a positive way, because I feel like okay, now I'm going to my next level of evolution, my next level of education, really, by realizing that we're really all one race. Like, it's only one human race on here. And I'm not discounting the importance of starting with your own culture. I'm going to keep emphasizing this because it's very important. You have to start with who you are now, in this space, at this time, in this physical body that you're in right now. Start here. So whatever culture you are, you need to dive into your ancestors, into your history, into the land where your people came from, into your communicating with the gods and goddesses that your ancestors spoke with. It's not necessarily you having to worship. This is not about worship. My favorite goddesses are the ones that reflect me, like Oshun, like Yemoya, like Oya. A strong connection with the goddesses that reflect you, then you have a much better chance of being more confident, being stronger. The conscious Black community who are very separatist and very much like, oh, we're not going to learn anything about what this race of people over here are doing because that's not us. And I can understand if that's where you're at in your development. However, eventually you have to move past that and realize that we're all one people. We're on this one planet together, and we got to get our shit together. This separatism, being separate, I see the value of it. And I used to be a strong proponent for segregation, because during the segregation era, Black people were more successful than in any time in history. Because we were together, we worked together, we loved each other, we took care of each other, and we were kind of like in this, like in a comfortable cocoon, sort of. Then when desegregation came in, that's when the shit hit the fan. That's when things really started going downhill for Black people in this country. It might still be a good idea, depending on where you're at in your development. Depending on where you're at in your development, it might be good for you to isolate yourself for a little while and only be around your own people. But eventually you grow out of that and you realize that the universe is amazingly huge. You know who you are, then you start learning about your other selves, your other multidimensional selves, your selves that come from other parts of the universe, the selves that are in different parallel realities, the selves that have lived in different time eras, different planets, like different star systems. Like going with, if I would have just continued with Black spirituality and Black nationalism, then I never would have learned about the connections that I have to Aztecs. I would not have learned about the connections that I have to Sirius, the connections that I have with Andromeda, the connection that I have with feline beings, the connections that I have outside of this very limited space that we call race. You're this one race, and this is all that you are. No, you're so much more. But you do have to begin with what you are, because if you don't start there, you're not going to be grounded enough to understand and be able to contribute and really learn and integrate the things that other cultures can teach. Because I've learned a lot from other cultures once I was rooted very strongly in my own, and that's the key. When you're rooted, there is the possibilities are infinite. I would really like to hear your comments and experiences with Black nationalism, with Black spirituality, with religion in general, specifically, culturally relevant religions. I want to hear everybody's opinion. It doesn't matter what race or culture you are. I would love to hear people's opinions about this. All right, peace.